In the space of about 12 months, the number of EVs available for sale in Australia has roughly doubled. And one of the best is this, the Kia Niro EV. The Niro itself is not a new car. It was released overseas back in 2017, and this electric version first arrived in Australia about 6 months ago. But it is the first Kia I've reviewed on this channel with the new Kia logo, which I think is a vast improvement over the old one. Being that it is a few years old, it does miss out on some of the more squarer and aggressive looking design language that we've seen in some more recent Kias like the Sorento and the Seltos. And it also features one of my least favourite design elements of any electric car, the blanked off front grille. I mean, electric cars still need a little bit of air to breathe and stay cool, so why not leave it open? These swooped back light clusters remind me a little bit of the ones in the Ford Escape, but they are halogen unfortunately, which project a very yellow coloured light, especially when compared to the white LED driving lights down below. As the Niro is not exclusively an EV, there is a hybrid version available as well. It has a conventional engine bay, which means we can actually see its electric motor. You can't do that in many EVs. What we're looking at is a 64 kilowatt electric motor that outputs 150 kilowatts of power and a very impressive 395 newton meters of torque. The range is 455 kilometers, or so Kia claim. And it's all powered by a 457 kilo battery that sits under the floor, which will take you 29 hours to charge from a regular 240 volt plug at home. If you've got a high-speed charger, you're looking at around about an hour to charge to 80%. At the back, the design is fairly conservative. These light clusters look really good at night though, and underneath the non-powered tailgate we get a 451 litre space which expands by a further 1,000 or so with the rear seats down. Underneath the floor there is no spare tyre, but you do get a tyre repair kit and of course the all-important wall charger. In fact, this particular car is so new, it's only done about 600 Ks that this hasn't even been taken out of the plastic yet. I think the interior of the Niro looks really good. It's a nice mixture of soft touch and textured plastics with leather accented seats and this nice metal finish with piano black across the middle here. It actually reminds me a little bit of Audi. This particular Niro EV is an S model, which means it gets a smaller 8-inch centre console screen than the top spec Sport version, which gets the full 10 inches. Which is a bit of a shame, especially considering how much this car costs, but we'll come to that a bit later on. The software on it is pretty pared back, but it does get wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto, which the top spec Sport model misses out on. The sound system has 6 speakers and it's pretty average, to be honest. We've got a row of shortcut buttons underneath that. Interior storage in the Niro is really good. We've got a little shelf here for your phone just on top of 2 USB outputs and another 12 volt outlet just there. Another big storage area just beneath that for bulky items. And then we've got this floating console here for the rotary dial gear shifter and your drive mode buttons. A little roller door here that's a little bit tricky to open for the cup holders, and they spring open in a very cool way. In fact, we've seen this design in a few other Kias and Hyundais just recently. And a nice deep center console bin with another USB outlet under there. I love this digital instrument cluster. I think this is one of the best I've seen in any car lately. It has a certain sort of retro futuristic style to it, especially with these 7-segment displays showing you the speedo and the range left on the battery. Did you know that 7-segment numbers were first patented back in 1903? They go way back. There, you just learned something. There's a lot to take in on this cluster, but it's all displayed very cleanly and it's very easy to understand. The Niro features the new Kia steering wheel. I haven't seen one of these before and I really like it. I think it's much better than the old one. It feels a bit more thick and sturdy in the hand. It's got a nice leather wrap with stitching, and this centerpiece where the airbag is much bigger than it used to be. In fact, the overall design looks a lot more like Jaguar. The functionality of it is much the same as the previous wheel, but I'm liking this design. I think it looks really good. A couple of paddle shifters behind it, which are actually not paddle shifters. They control the amount of regenerative braking if you're doing one pedal driving. The seats are quite comfortable, 8 ways of electric adjustment for the driver with lumbar support. They are cloth with leather accents and yeah, they feel pretty good. The driving position is sort of at a medium sort of position within the cabin. I've got a good visibility out the front there and also all around through the blind spots and through the rear vision mirror. All right, back seat of the Niro EV. And actually really good. I've got loads of legroom. This is impressive for a compact SUV to have this much legroom. It's terrific. I'm not even touching the seat in front of me, and that's in my regular seating position. I'm 190 centimeters tall. Headroom maybe just a little bit short on that with my hair touching the ceiling, but that's all right. We've got an armrest here with 2 cup holders, 2 rear air vents. 2 adults could fit back here quite comfortably. 3 would be a little bit of a squash, but 3 kids would be fine, although they'll be unhappy because there's no rear USBs. Well, there's nothing surprising about this, but the cabin on the road is a supremely quiet place to be. I mean, aside from the fact that there's no petrol engine noise, there's also just very little road noise coming in from the outside world at all. It's very well insulated, and it actually takes a little while to get used to that just because it is so quiet in here. I'm used to having to, talk over the top of a turbocharged V6 while I do these videos, but here there's just nothing. I can actually speak at a really quiet volume. The only thing you do hear is a little bit of a sci-fi sort of fake electric engine noise, and that's mostly so pedestrians know that you're nearby, because these cars really don't make much noise at all. It's quite possible to creep up behind people who are walking right in front of you and they won't know you're there. As the speed limit here changes from 80 to 100, just that instant power when you put your foot down, it just comes on straight away with no hesitation. And the funny thing is, I keep on thinking I can hear engine noise, but it's not this car, it's the big Ram truck next to me. It is pretty quick at 7.8 seconds 0 to 100, so why don't we just try that out right now and see how it feels. Okay, we're in sport mode, come to a complete stop, can't build any revs, so foot on the floor. It's pretty good. Like I said, it's not quite at Tesla Model 3 levels of acceleration, but it's perfectly adequate. I do have to say the adaptive cruise control is actually not that easy to turn on. I'm sort of mashing buttons here on the wheel and I can't quite get it to work. I could sit down and read the manual, but who has time? Ah, got it. Driving this car with no engine noise, all of these cool looking digital displays, the adaptive cruise control on and the assisted steering, it really does feel like we are in the future. It has arrived. The Niro, like every other EV, has regenerative braking, which means that you can drive this car with only one pedal, which sounds a bit strange if you've never done it before. It probably is a bit weird the first time you do it, but it's amazing how quickly you get used to it. And aside from giving your foot a bit of a rest, the other great benefit is that the car uses the heat and friction and power it generates from that engine braking and feeds it back into the battery to top up the charge. And in the Niro, unlike every other EV I've driven, you can actually see your range going up as the battery recharges. Normally, most EVs just show you that their level is going down more slowly, but this one actually increases. I've just gone from 313 kilometers range remaining to 314. It's quite satisfying to see. Although the 450 odd kilo battery on the bottom of this car keeps it fairly well planted to the road, it is a fairly tall SUV. So on some of these twisty corners I'm going around now, you do get a bit of body roll, and there is a warning sign just up here on the sun visor about potentially tipping over. I think you would have to be doing something quite silly to do that, and you wouldn't encounter that on a normal situation. With all that torque going to the front wheels and coming on straight away, sometimes they do slip a little bit, and that's probably something you really need to just be wary of in the wet. There's 3 different drive modes, Eco, Normal and Sport, and just coming off the lights here, in Eco mode you certainly can feel that the car is not as eager to leap forward. It probably feels a little more on par with what you'd expect a petrol-driven compact SUV to feel like. Put it into normal mode and the acceleration does become a little bit more lively, and in Sport the power is just there straight away. With the Niro EV's claimed range of over 400 kilometres and me living in an inner suburb in the city, I don't have any range anxiety. That would suit my regular driving habits just fine. If you live in an outer suburb and you commute a long distance, or you live in a regional area, then that might be something you want to factor in, because that is probably about 100 to 150 kilometres less than you get on a full tank of petrol. But it is substantially better than some other EVs that only give you 250 kilometres of range, and that I would find quite hard to live with. Where I think the Niro really excels over its rivals like the Nissan Leaf and the Hyundai Kona EV, on which this car shares a platform, is that I think this car is actually a lot more fun to drive. There's a bit of a sense, especially from people who haven't driven them before, that electric cars are in some way inferior to drive from an enjoyment point of view, and they're not. They're fantastic. And you quickly forget that the car you're driving doesn't have a petrol engine. The Niro is a really engaging car to drive. At $67,490, the Niro is not a cheap compact SUV, but I do think it is about the best value EV on the market. Yes, it's more expensive than a Tesla Model 3, but it's also a lot more practical. And there's no concerns over Kia's build quality because it's top notch. And would I choose a Niro over a Nissan Leaf? Well, to be honest, yes I would. Any day and twice on Sunday.